You're really going to make me do it, huh? All right. If you insist, we'll do the Aaron Rodgers thing again. Whatever.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers who come and listen every single day, including those dog days of February in the offseason when we have to talk about annoying stuff like Aaron Rodgers, which is going to be the first question in this mailbag. It is... I don't like Mailbag Martez anymore. I thought about it. It's weird. I don't speak Spanish like natively. It's weird. Timeline Tuesday. Let's try that on for size today. Timeline Tuesday. What are the other ones? There were some other interesting ones when I asked you all. I don't know. Keep them coming, but we'll try that on for size. Okay. The first question comes from one of these not Kevins. There's a lot of Kevins in the mailbag, and none of them are Kevin. But thanks to whoever this Kevin is, thank you for the clickbait, who asks, why should I look forward to Aaron Rodgers as Vikings QB? Look, it's not happening. Do I have to tell you? It's not happening. You can feel it. There's bloggers. There was one, I think it was Viking Age. I think Kevin Seifert had a tweet where they're starting to like, whoa, it's starting to make sense. Aaron Rodgers to the Vikings. Did you know that the last time a Packers quarterback went to the Jets, he went to the Vikings after? Yeah, we know. We all know. We always get it. This is, to me, one of those stories that you hear a lot about when it's really hard to make content. In the season, everybody's got ideas, right? Everybody's got their thoughts and everybody can make opinions. You can all do your listicles. You can do your power rankings every week. Like there's your Tuesday articles done. You do your power rankings. But in the off season, when you have to generate content, you either get really creative stuff, people who want to go in depth, people who are learning a new thing and share it with you. I try to do that the best I can. Or people who take somebody unfollowing their team on Instagram because they deleted their Instagram account or something and spinning it into a trade rumor because they can't come up with anything else, right? And the whole reason that I have kept mailbags as long as I have on Locked On Vikings is to give me a chance, like to force me to engage with the topics that get buzzy, that people are talking about, that people maybe want to hear about, that I don't respect. And this is one of those. I don't respect it. If you are earnestly pushing this, I don't respect you. And there are so many deadbolts on it when you think about it for like 2 seconds that make like just a critical thinking perspective that it's not worth thinking about like ever. And to be fair, I think the vast majority of people talking about Aaron Rodgers to the Vikings are really just trying to make the Favre joke, the joke, the Packers, Jets, Vikings. Oh, it's the same. Like that, they're just trying to do that. And like, okay, whatever, get your kicks in, but it's not. I'm not going to accuse you of being creative. It's been done. But if you want to get in on it, if you want to say the same joke everyone else is saying, and that I'm not going to begrudge you that. But if you want to be serious, like let's benefit of the doubt. Okay. Maybe I'm being too mean. Maybe I'm being too judgmental. Maybe I'm overlooking an idea that actually has merit. Okay. Let's take it face value. The first deadbolt on this that makes it super different from the Favre thing to me is Favre wanted the Vikings specifically. He wanted the Vikings when he first was divorcing with the Packers after 2007. He wanted to go to the Vikings. And it was reported at the time that the Packers would not allow that. They didn't want to cut him because they didn't want him to go to the Vikings. They wanted to trade him so they could keep him away from that. And he had to retire and then unretire and do that thing with the Jets situation to get out of his contract with the Jets. And he had to do the same thing with the Packers the year before because he didn't want to go to the Vikings. There is no allegory here with the Packers. I don't think there's really bad blood with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers any more than there is with any other team. It was a business. It was that was it. and they traded him, and he requested a trade, and they granted it. It was not the same situation at all. So that's something. And the other thing is, locker room wise, Brett Favre was seen as a positive locker room thing, even through his time with the Jets, where he got hurt and he wasn't the same, and it was an okay season. And then when he came to the Vikings, it was like, he's going to juice things up. And people said maybe he's going to be a diva, and he's going to be his diva self, and it's going to be a problem. But it was pretty clear pretty fast that Brett Favre was really good for the team chemistry of the 2009 Vikings. And that team had a lot of fun and played together, and he gave them an energy. They all were endeared by this 40-year-old graybeard running around like a kid on Christmas. He was a positive personality. Now, I feel I should say, not all things about Brett Favre's personality are positive. There were some text messages I think we would all like to forget about, and some welfare fraud that also we probably should not speak too much about. But this is not that kind of podcast. But suffice to say, in 2009, in that locker room, he did not divide anyone. The only person that he pulled away from the team was Brad Childress, and that had a lot more to do with Brad Childress. Compare that to Rodgers, who completely divided the Jets. It seems like not even argued that Rodgers was a toxic presence on the Jets. He was in the owner's ear. There was that suspicious meeting, that closed door meeting, I think on the airplane, like 12 hours before they fired Robert Saleh, or maybe it was in London, like that, they say, oh, they didn't have it, they didn't talk about it. But obviously, this is like people are going to ask those questions. Not to mention the seeming roster control he had. They brought in Alan Lazard and they brought in Devontae Adams, and none of it worked. The Jets were terrible. They were a better team with Zach Wilson. And that's the other problem with this Aaron Rodgers thing is he's bad. He's a bad quarterback now. It's over. He's older, hilariously, than Brett Favre was when he came to Minnesota. He's 41. Favre was 40. He's very clearly in the twilight of his career. He came off the Achilles. I guess he's as healthy as he's going to be off that Achilles, but he's just not good anymore. And I could see it. The most visible game to me was, of course, Week 5 in London, and I could see it. He was writing checks his arm couldn't cash, and he's going through that moment that every quarterback goes through when they get old. If they're lucky enough, if they're good enough to play until they're old, they get this moment where they can't make the throws that they've built their game off of, and they have to recalibrate their game. And some guys survive it. Tom Brady did, won another Super Bowl. I think Brett Favre did, figured it out, right? And some guys don't. They just don't figure it out. I think Peyton Manning did in 2015, really, I do. The game he had left in him was a bit more short game, and it wasn't nearly as impressive, but it was good enough, right? And they had a good defense, and they won. Rodgers never did that. And I don't want him to be playing guess and check when we got a rookie waiting in the wings. And then that's the last deadbolt to this, is that the Vikings have J.J. McCarthy and they're excited about him. The Vikings had Tavares Jackson, and that he was their young guy, but he was in year 3 and they were like giving up on him. He was losing a camp competition to Sage Rosenfels when Brett Favre came in, completely different situations. So go get your jokes off. But if you're actually purporting this as a serious option for the Vikings, I think you're just unserious. And you don't have to be serious, but don't expect me to take you seriously. All right, I'm going to get to other questions. I've got a lot more. I'm actually going to spend the whole next segment on one thing too, and then we'll do all the other miscellaneous questions at the end. So that will be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. Look, football, it's over. But there's still the NBA, there's still the NHL, and that means there's still PrizePicks. You can stay in the game with PrizePicks. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's like Anthony Edwards more or less than, 3.5 3-pointers, or, LeBron James points or something like that. Whatever it is, stack a few of them together, right now, you can look. So Jason Tatum, more or less than 29 points. What's he going to do? You tell me. Put it in your PrizePicks projection. It's quick and easy. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean you can get your winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Let's move on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. So the next series of questions, look, okay, I got one question this week, and it was the same one from everybody. Everybody asked a version of this question. Coming off the Super Bowl, Sayuma asks, like always, we reassess after the Super Bowl. Should the Vikings pretty much invest every dollar on the D and O line? Ryan asks, will the Vikings defense take a page from the Eagles and rush with 4 or 5 more often? Skolabites asks, what realistic pieces could be added to the D-line and what could allow the Vikings to competently rush 4? Would B-Flow even want to do that? Everybody's asking this, and there are a lot of interesting kind of angles on what do the Vikings do at D-line, right? First things first, though. I want to caution the heuristic that's coming through in these questions, which is, what we do every year, which is look at the Super Bowl winning team and say, okay, what can we do? And I don't think at its core is a bad idea to look at a good team and say, what can we take from them, right? Teams do it all the time. They take plays, they take ideas, it's a copycat league. Somebody has success here. You try to go get the next version of that. I get it. But what I don't want to do is limit that success based on the super visible Super Bowl game. Because the Chiefs actually had an O-line that was reasonable this year. They had play. I mean, they got a little injured, right? Joe Thuney kicking out to tackle. That we didn't want that. Okay, that was not a good idea. But I will reiterate, O-line play in the NFL is a pandemic. It is bad. It is bad everywhere. And what you are frustrated with about the Vikings, while it's not impactful, everyone else is dealing with it too. Very few teams have a good O-line. And the only way to get one, if you look at the Eagles, the Eagles have had, in the last 4 years, all the drafts since they drafted Hurts. In those 4 drafts, they've had 12 picks in the top 100. Normal clip, right? 3 a year. They have used 8 of those in the trenches. 8 of 12 top 100 picks in the trenches. That investment only works, though, if you hit on those. And they have. It's been Jalen Carter. It's been Jordan Davis. It's been Landon Dickerson on the other side. They've even got moments out of Nolan Smith, who I don't think has paid off his draft hype. But still, that is how you do it. And I'm sorry if that's not a satisfying answer. It's not. There's not a blueprint to this. And I think too often we want to make a blueprint. We want to say, well, that's it. Okay, we look at the team that won the Super Bowl, backtrack to all the things they did. Let's do all those things. It's a logical place to go. It's a natural place for your brain to go. But you have to understand, for every Eagles, there's another team that drafted a whole bunch of O-linemen and they all suck. And that team is bad. And it always comes down to if you hit on the pick. If you hit on the pick, the position you chose, the trade you did for it, the style you chose, and if it was a fit or whatever, all of that stuff will cease to matter as soon as the pick hits or misses. And you can be the team that picks all the right positions at all the right times, all the high leverage ones that have good WAR or whatever. And if those players suck, you will do worse than a team like the Lions that got endless flack in 2023, was it? For going running back, linebacker, tight end, these players that we don't think matter, and I think we're really wrong about that. But they're all good, and it had a good impact on the Lions, and that is what is important. So how do you get a good player? Well, ain't that the secret question? But that's the way it should be. It should be that this comes down to a thing that is unanswerable consistently. As for the Vikings improving their pass, of course we want to improve our pass rush. Of course we want to improve our O-line. That's a truism. Everybody always does. But with the Vikings specifically, So rushing with 5 is their base defense. And that's a weird thing because we chart those as blitzes. So we feel like they blitz so often. No, they're just a 5-man rush team. That's their normal rush. And a 4-man rush is their conservative. They're kind of their back off a little bit rush. Maybe their nickel thing. But they rush, especially when they're in their base package where they have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, they just rush those 5 all the time instead of dropping one of them in coverage. Unless you want to do sim pressure stuff. That's just how they live, for the pros and the cons of that. If you want to add pieces to the D-line, somebody else asked about second tier. Look at the D-line free agent list, especially the interior guys. Tons of names that are awesome. I like the class. I love spending a bunch of money there. And I love spending a bunch of money on O-line too. Sure, go for it. I think you can. But if you want it consistent, if you want the trenches to be a strength through beyond just 1 or 2 years, you can't band-aid it with money. You need to build a solid foundation through the draft. You need to do a lot of Ed Ingraming, and you need to hit on them more than Ed Ingram hit. And that's scary, right? Because every time you pick a guard, and for all the guards you want them to pick, all that guy you really like in college, they can all be Ed Ingram. And if we're being perfectly honest, Ed Ingram isn't even that bad of an outcome. He started for 3 years as a second-round pick. A lot of people get less. No Wyatt Davises, right? But you could Wyatt Davis if you do that. I mean, shoot, you could pick a guy 4th overall and then have him flame out. That was Matt Khalil. There's no guarantee here. And so for me, I choose to focus on trying to improve ourselves as evaluators. How do we get better at figuring out who the good players are, right? That will give us so much more insight. Versus just saying, well, they should invest this much. Because investing this much does not equal a correlation of getting that much better. It comes at a cost that's guaranteed, right? You definitely aren't getting a good corner if you're getting a good O-line instead, right? And you maybe aren't getting a good O-line. The only way to really understand this system is to do your best, be okay with being wrong sometimes about O-linemen, and try to get better every time you are. That's the way it has to be. And that's the way that I choose to approach it on this show, even though that's going to mean that I'm going to say stuff that ages bad. Whatever. It's a daily podcast. That's part of the gig. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to some miscellaneous questions next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout games, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can still come back from the bathroom and still probably get about the same line you had before. The NBA action is well underway now, so get involved with FanDuel. If you're looking for a bigger payout too, you can combine all your bets into a same game parlay or just feel out if that fourth quarter comeback is coming or not, and you can bet accordingly. FanDuel's live betting feature gives you all the stuff that you need to make those kinds of decisions. Live stats, updates, play-by-plays, even in a faster moving sport like basketball. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Throw down $5 on something, and if you win, $150 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's get to some miscellaneous questions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Jordan Larson, who asks, Super Bowl Patrick Mahomes looked like Sam Darnold week 18. Is Patrick Mahomes a fraud? Sure, man. Why not? Sure. What are you going to do? Arrest me? Nobody's going to. I'm 20 some odd minutes into a podcast about the Vikings. None of my Patrick Mahomes takes matter to you, okay? You're not going to snitch, right? You're not going to snitch? We're all here together. It'll be our secret. Cameron Rolfe says, I hear a lot of talk from you and the guys that you don't necessarily believe that the Vikings will splash on one of the big free agent names at corner, D tackle, or guard. What do you like in the second tier of names at those spots? I'm assuming you're talking about the football party guys. You can find me on that Mondays and Thursdays. You can find that audio here on the Locked On Vikings feed. You can also find an extra football party on Wednesday. I'm not on that one, but it's all the Care 11 people. Go listen to it. And you can, of course, find it on the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel. Thank you for the plug, Cameron. So just do the math. Just look at the amount of needs the Vikings have, and including, departing free agents who have to either be re-signed or replaced. That's a need. And the amount of money that they have, and you'll see that it actually looks pretty much like they can comfortably do everything they have to do, but they can't be frivolous about it. They can't be irresponsible about it. They got to be efficient with their money, and if they are efficient with their money, they'll be fine. They're not going to have to do any restructuring, I don't think. They could if they want to. That's an option, but there's no necessity. That said, that does kind of mean you have to be a little bit more judicious about your spending, and you can't just go get the most expensive guy at every position. So if you want Trey Smith and also Travarius Ward and also Milton Williams and like all of the big names in free agency, okay, you're not going to get all of the big names in free agency. Personally, I think they can get one. I think somebody, but like, be it YouTube comments or Twitter or mailbag questions or Blue Sky, whatever it is, I have seen just about every opinion on what the Vikings' most important need is. I would say corner is their biggest emergency. Got to do something about it. And I'm defining that as like, if they had to play a game today, corner would be their biggest problem because they just physically don't have bodies. They've got futures contract guys trotting out there right now. They have to deal with that probably in free agency and the draft. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but a lot of people will say O-line is the biggest thing. Look at how the playoff game ended. And other people would say D-line is their biggest thing. Look, they couldn't get any pressure on Stafford or Goff in the 2 games they lost to both of those teams. And I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong there. Sure, whatever. Like, I've got where I stand. You have where you stand. Somebody's disappointed. Somebody is going to be disappointed if you want the big name there. Not all of you. I think some of you are going to be happy, but some of you aren't. And as for the second tier names, we've been doing on the football party a series going position by position down the line of names and who do we like and who are the efficient options and who are the big names and who are the under the radar guys. So you can find it there, but and I'll kind of defer to that for that. But I just wanted to kind of address the first part of that where I do think there is a splash in there somewhere. And I will say this. You're going to be exhausted by the end of free agency week. Your head will be spinning for like 72 straight hours with everything the Vikings are going to do. They are going to do so much. They've got money to spend and they've got a long list of things to do. They are not going to be, I would be stunned if they sat there silently. They are going to do stuff. So get ready for that. How splashy it is, I don't know, but it will be a volume of headlines, let me tell you. Landon Redley says, why didn't Wes Phillips get any looks at other coaching opportunities when McCown got head coach interviews and Udinsky got an OC job? So I think the answer to this question is with the people specifically. For Udinsky, him getting an OC job, there was that Gessling article, and that either exposed or just informed the general public of what was already going on behind the scenes. But he has been a rising name. Is a young kind of upstart guy. He's a very young OC, very, very green for that job. I kind of don't like the hire for Seattle because I just think he needed a couple more years. And I'm not just saying that as a homer for the Vikings that would have liked him to stay in the building. But he got like 5 OC interviews, right? Like he is a hot name for his own personal reasons, for the way Kevin O'Connell speaks about him and the contributions that he made and the credit that he got for the Dobbs sanity moment. He took a lot of the credit for that and got his name kind of on the map doing that. Josh McCown was not part of that, right? McCown, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he only got the one head coach interview. I don't think the Bears reached out. I think it was just the Jets. And the Jets and McCown have been like flirting with this for years. That's like a specific thing to their relationship. And as for Wes Phillips, well, he's not going to get an OC interview because he is an OC, and he didn't get any head coaching interviews because he doesn't have any very, very strange relationships with other teams. So it's up at the individual guys. Baba Ganoush asks, which IOL or IDL from Vikings history would you most want transferred to the current team? I've almost got the time machine completed and need to figure out my first steps. It's Page. It's Page. It's always Alan Page. It's always Alan Page. If you get to era adjust. I got to say that because Alan Page played at the big ol' weight of like 235. That was big in the 70s, but that's a safety now. So like, that's a linebacker, I should say. That's like if you're rushing off the edge at 235, we're going, can you cover? Or we're asking you to put on 20 pounds. Like 255 is like still a little bit smaller than an edge for me that I like. 235 on an interior is a suicide mission. Alan Page wouldn't just suck. He would die. I mean, that's suicidal. But obviously era adjusted, it's different. If I don't get to era adjust, that means I'm not going that far back in the history of the Vikings. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. A nice, responsible Linval Joseph. How about a Linval Joseph? We can all get behind that, right? A prime Linval, good for those like crazy zone stops, had pass rush to him. You get sacks from him every once in a while. Even a pick six if you want, or fumble six. Yeah, give me a Linval Joseph on the interior. If we want to go O-line, I guess like a Steve Hutchinson. It takes me far enough back, but there's your interior guy. But I don't know. You know, one of those guys. I guess Linval Joseph isn't a Hall of Famer. We could go Kevin Williams. Actually, yeah, I'm changing my answer to that. Let's go Kevin Williams. Let's get a nice Ring of Honor player in there. Next one comes from Kevin. I think this one really is Kevin, actually, who says, do you think the Minnesota Vikings could adopt certain mindsets from the Vikings during the Viking age? I mean, they always found ways to take advantage of technology, including their longships and weapons. The Vikings of the Viking age were very good assimilators. They like in their time, when they were first encountered, when they first connected with like the Anglo peoples and, you know, peoples in the like more like the Russian regions of the world and even down to like Spain and Africa and even across the Atlantic, every time they first encountered a people, it was kind of the same way it always was. Like, here's like, okay, quick European history. So welcome to Locked On Vikings. So you had Rome, and Rome, as it expanded, it would encounter a civilization that wasn't as technologically advanced necessarily, and culturally was extraordinarily disrespected by Rome. There were a lot of really interesting cultures in like Franco peoples and Germanic peoples and then Nordic peoples that Romans didn't really respect at all. And so our accounts of history, we've like lost a lot of that culture because of the way Romans treated it. So they would be seen very much as barbarians. And as, you know, you would hear more about the violence than you would hear about their celebrations or the food that they brought to the empire. And they would eventually assimilate into the Roman Empire and become part of it. And then, you know, and Rome became such a big thing and like a big, such a big melting pot of so many different cultures. But the Vikings, that isn't to say that like the pillaging and all of the really heinous stuff that happened in the early parts, but that is to say that that was really only the first 100 years of the Vikings as a member of the world stage were that. The last 300 years before the Vikings had assimilated so much that they were unrecognizable as anything and they stopped being referred to as a people were very much about range, like distance. So I don't know, call that like safety range, and trade, which is an easy one, like the literal. So it's trading and it's range. There's your answer. And then Johnny Munt Enjoyer asks, who on the team would you not let date your sister? Ivan Pace. Feels like a pretty easy one. All right. I'm not going to look into it if you want. I will see you guys tomorrow. And as always, let's go.